found AHO Radio. We're authentic human outliers coming together to help heal the fear of being authentic. To bring back genuine human conversation. No hype, no sensationalism, just honest talk about the critical issues affecting society, affecting humankind. And now, here are the hosts of AHO Radio, John Krotec and Bill Protzmann. Hey, John.
Hey,
from
Bill,
the left
how's it
corner.
going? I'm telling you, man, everything is good these days. So here we are, another episode of AHO Radio, and glad to be here with you, Bill, on the West Coast. And, here I am on the West Coast too, but in the middle of pandemic, things are rocking and rolling, and looks like some parts of the country are opening up and others aren't. So
let's talk about this. I love your idea of patriotism and the rat race, because it's something that, we think about the rat race as being an American thing because we're Americans, but it affects everybody, dude. And so what's it like to be patriotic in China right now, for example, or Mongolia or wherever? I mean, yeah.
Well, I want, this time period of isolation, first time in my life I've ever had to stay this close to home for so many weeks in a row, week 7 coming up. But, it's given me a lot of time and lots of people, millions of people around the world to figure out what's really important. And the one thing, the big buzzword that we always hear is, patriotism, what that means. And then I started thinking about the song by Bob Marley. If you haven't heard it, it's called The Rat Race. And the lyrics are, Bob Marley in his fashion, in his style, he was that reggae guy with some deep messages. And so, nationalism, when does it tip into something more harmful?
Yeah. And, what's the dividing line?
And what's the definition of patriotism? What is it's nice to love your country and to support your country, but what happens when your country does things that aren't necessarily in alignment with your own North Star? Or, so you mentioned patriotism in China, or, everybody's patriotic to a certain extent. You can't watch the Olympics, the opening ceremony, and not catch patriotism. But when does it go into something different? That's a good question.
It's probably different for all of us, man. I wonder if it's related to something like fear or greed, like when you're running along the road of patriotism and at some point it tips nationalistic and you start to think more about what your nation needs than what, the nation next door needs. And here in America, we think about this all the time with Mexican and South American immigrants coming up, Central American. We're always faced with that question in the border states, California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, down on the south, and then those who are on the north are also facing the same kind of questions. It's like, how do you stay patriotic but not become nationalistic?
Well, but even, taking it to just humanity or humankind itself, remember the game King of the Mountain?
Oh, yeah, great game.
We always want to win. We always want to be on top. And I don't think that's just an American thing. I think that, my dad, who was raised he was Croatian, and from a historical point of view, they were decimated at one time in their history by the Serbs. So my grandfather, did not really like the Serbs. Of course, I have nothing against a Serbian person, against anybody really. And so, very patriotic, even though he came to America and he never really learned to speak the language, but he worked his tail off and, raised kids and, believed in the American dream. Whether or not he lived it, he certainly believed in it. But how far do we go with that ethos of patriotism? How far do we go till it doesn't tip and we have to be king of the mountain to everything we engage ourselves in? I mean, I don't think America's always right. I don't think anybody's always right.
There's certainly contrast, and I think contrast is useful, if for no other reason than you get to observe it. I forgot how I got this. I think it might have been in Next Draft, so I'll give a shout out to Next Draft. David Pell, if you haven't found Next Draft yet, edits this online sort of news compilation that you can get every day in your email, and it's a great thing for me anyway. I find it very useful. But one of the articles that he had in there a few weeks ago had a link to the speech that the Chancellor of Germany gave way back in March when they decided to close things down. And there's subtitles, so if you don't speak German, you can actually read what it is that she's saying. And I thought, well, this is interesting. I've seen a lot of American leaders on TV recently. I'll take a look because I have a German heritage at what's going on in Germany. And I had forgotten that Chancellor Merkel is a physicist and that she grew up in East Berlin, which, if you're listening and don't remember what East Berlin was like, it was still behind the Iron Curtain when communism was a thing and the Cold War was happening. So this entire city was divided in two. And she grew up on the communist side. She's now the Chancellor of Germany. So I listened to the speech, and more for the listening experience. John, I wanted to hear what a leader sounds like that's not an American leader. And what I heard was so different. It shocked me in a way, but it also gave me confidence. I think another one that's doing that is the Prime Minister of New Zealand. Like, if you listen to her talk, you get this sense that it's okay to be German. It's okay to be New Zealander. It's okay to be American, whatever. You're empowered in your nation because you can be proud of the way your leader is leading things without knowing that you might also have an impact on other nations that you don't want to have. Germany is being very generous. There's whole trains that are running from other countries in Europe to Germany where COVID-19 patients can be treated. And that's a huge thing when it comes to cooperation. I don't know if that's happening in America. Is America opening its hospitals to anyone who from another country might need treatment? So there's those sort of differences, but it's more about being okay with being German. Because a long time, American Germans were pretty hated people, especially around the time of Hitler.
Well, you think about Germany, though. I'm glad you brought Germany up because, we talk about nationalism and the rise of the Nazi Party, the National Socialists, right before World War II. And we say, well, how did something like that ever happen? Well, we have to take stock of what happened at the Treaty of Versailles. We're going to talk a little bit about history here, but very briefly. But, we put such stringent measures on the country of Germany that we left them no way out. I think it was 4,000 or 5,000% inflation rate. Money was basically worthless. People were starving. They felt bad being Germans. They were made to feel like the heel of Europe, the scourge because of World War I. And that's a different issue. But my point is that, we all are in this together. And so Germans, to empower them, along came, we all know about Adolf Hitler, and he empowered them, but he took patriotism to the extreme, and millions of people paid the price. And sometimes we wonder at the price that people are paying for certain lifestyles, or when is it the tipping point? When is enough enough? When does being patriotic start to really degrade existence? There's something to that. I don't know if there's an answer to it. I think it's different for everybody. Like you said, there's a different definition of leadership. But I think it's something that we really need to take a hard look at. And I didn't say nobody's more true blue American than me and Bill, but when I said that America's not always right, I have the courage to say that. America's not always right. And there's some people, I would challenge them. I don't want to go to fisticuffs, but there are some people that say America's always right. And when you have that line in the sand drawn, sometimes you leave people no choice but to want to battle you or but to get to some type of conflict. It could be, an economic war. It could be, you don't know. But when you draw the line in the sand and you don't open yourself up to viewpoints of other countries, then you're in a shadow world, because it just opens up a whole can of worms.
Oh, and it's a tough can. I mean, look at the United Nations and the World Bank and NATO and the European Union. I mean, we're trying. We're actually doing some experiments here as a civilization. We're trying to figure out how patriotism can jump borders so that you can still retain your national identity, or even maybe your national language, which is a source of great pride for people like in France, while still being a world citizen in a way that is also patriotic, is like patriotic to the world in some way. That's a crazy kind of leap to make, but do you understand what I'm saying there?
Yeah, I do. There's an interesting book out there by John Perkins. It's called The Confessions of an Economic Hitman. And it describes what you just talked about, the World Bank and nationalism and patriotism, I guess, and business acumen, and you know how we cross borders and do business a different way these days. It's a really good book, and he talks about that, and I think if you read the book, he sheds light on those kinds of things, patriotism and what we're really doing to the world. And that we somewhere along the line, I think humans have always been proud of where they come from. It's nothing new. This tribe and that tribe, and tribes grew into nations, and nations grew into strategic alliances, and the rest is history. History just happens. But to get to that tipping point, and that on the brink, during the 50s, I think early 60s, there was the Cuban Missile Crisis. I mean, how far were we going to go? A global nuclear war? I don't know. I just don't get it sometimes. We're talking about really heavy duty subjects, and we got such a short period of time. We could debate this on probably 50 shows, and we would probably have 50 different guests on the subject of patriotism, and we'd probably get 50 different definitions. To me, it means what you just said, being proud of your country. But in a way, maybe this is a 21st century way of looking at it, but in a way that doesn't bleed onto the sovereign rights of other nations, citizens of other nations, without blowing smithereens out of them.
I'd expand that. I'd say in a way that doesn't bleed onto them, and in a way that doesn't greed onto them. We have so many billionaires in the world right now who've leveraged the world economy to their benefit. And they've done that in many ways by taking advantage of things like inexpensive labor. I won't say cheap, but inexpensive. If you're a business owner, you're going to choose to have your stuff made by people who can make it for less. And other practices like that have given some of the nations in the world an economic leg to stand on where there wasn't one before. India and China are monstrous powerhouses economically now, which is amazing. But things are shifting. And now that COVID has stopped the rat race, like pretty much dead in its tracks, we don't want to restart the rat race. We want to start up again in a way that says, hey, now that we have a choice, where are we going to take our business? What is the patriotic thing to do? It's the patriotic thing to keep our business within the North and South American continents, because that economic engine that is in the North can help support the economic engines in the South. Do we want to do that? Is there enough humility between nations to say, let's work together on this? Or are we still digging in and building a wall between us and the next guy? These are big questions. And it's fun to be in an era where the world is having to come to grips with them. I mean, it's uncomfortable. Don't get me wrong. It really hurts, and it's scary. But here we are, and we have this opportunity to, on a global scale, now that the rats have stopped chasing the cheese, to say, how do we want to restart again? What do we want to do? Do we want to just put the rats back in the maze or on the wheels and fire the engines up and make it go? That's what got us to this place of such a consumer-driven materialism. That's not something that's sustainable anyway. So maybe
No, it's a failed model. I think it goes
model.
back. I think the question is a complex question, but I think it's a simple answer. It goes back to the individual and individual choices.
Yes.
And when if I'm upset about a $5 coffee at a local coffee shop and I continue to go there, then shame on me. But if I make a choice not to go there and make my coffee at home, then I've made a conscious choice to make things better. And I think it goes into patriotism too. At all cost, America at all costs. I don't think we live in a global society anymore that we can continue to do that. I think that what you shed the light on is we need to consider global society and maybe not do business with countries that have inexpensive labor, or because it could lead to something not good like what we're seeing right now. I think, like you said, the rat race got us here. How do we slow the rats down? Well, we give the rats a choice. If you're going to continue to lead and govern and make poor choices for the people, then I'm not going to vote for you. If you're going to continue to make cheap product that utilizes inexpensive labor, then I'm not going to buy from you anymore. And by the way, I'm not going to consume as much as I used to consume because it feeds nations that might not be necessarily a friend of the country I live in. So I think, but I don't want to go back to the Cold War days either. But I agree with you wholeheartedly. There's an opportunity here. And I'm still trying to figure it out like everybody else. But I think it goes to personal choice. I'm back to square one again, circular discussion, but starts with you. Starts with you.
And you know what? I want to empower anyone who's listening and says, but I don't have a choice about where I work. I've got to do what I've got to do to make this go. And I'd say, first of all, congratulations, because if you're working and you've consciously made that choice, that's the choice we're talking about, and you've made it. The choice to choose one restaurant versus another, if you have to work for a restaurant, you might ask some questions and just get a feel for what the owner's positions are on certain things, like do they take care of their employees. One of the amazing things in Germany is that everybody's job is intact. Nobody's losing their jobs. They're on an extended vacation. When they come back, then they'll be back employed in the jobs that they were in before the lockdown began. That's a choice. That's a powerful choice for the leaders to make there. And America, we have much more individual choice. So yes, make those individual choices, like every moment, make that choice happen in a way that's sustainable, that takes you in the way that in your gut is the right way to go. And ask your boss, so how does the company feel about this? Get behind the facade and actually take some time, because the way that you're empowering the economy, and all of us are rats on the wheel, the way that we spin that wheel is more important right now than how fast the wheel starts to spin again. And John, you're right. It's not going to spin as fast as it spun before. So
so patriotism to me then is loving your country, and then also doing what's right. And I don't necessarily think killing other people and other nations is right. If there's a defense to aggression, that's a little bit different. But we're living obviously in a new paradigm. Humans have always lived in new paradigms because the nature of history is dynamic.
Yeah, it's evolving. It's changing all the time.
So love your country, support your country. And by that, I mean support leadership that does the right thing, not only for the constituents that they govern, but also what's right for the global community now. I don't think that you're ever going to get rid of aggression, or it'd be great, in a perfect world, but I think that you're always going to have a certain element in the global society and all aggression is fear of the unknown. It's much tougher. Think about the Hatfields and the McCoys. If they had worked something out, they would have had decades of harmony. But because the fence posts were at a different location and they were arguing about measurements, we know what happened. But so I just would say, don't believe everything you read. Vote for the people that you think are going to give you the best leadership. And if it gets to the point to where you think you're being forced to do something that you don't really agree with, then just don't do it. Make a stand.
Yeah, even if it's a micro stand, make a stand.
So, yeah.
John, you said it. I can't think of anything more I want to add, brother. You nailed it. And as always, a pleasure hanging out with you, talking about stuff like this that matters with you, talking about what's real.
What's real. And AHO Radio, don't be a hamster, don't be a rat. Make wise choices and be safe and well.
Amen, brother. AHO.
AHO. Love you, man.
Love you, brother. Thank you for joining us on this episode of AHO Radio. Information we mentioned is probably in the show notes, but if we missed anything, please let us know and we'll get it added for you. Subscribe to the AHO Radio channel on YouTube to stay connected, and as always, we wish you health, success, and significance. AHO!
AHO!